3 and 8, we're going to talk about, 3 and 8, we're going to talk about an awful lot. 3 is establishing the contract. 8 is sort of turning it into action. And all along the way, we're going to do 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. 3, we're going to establish and maintain agreements. 4, cultivate trust and safety, right? Be respectful, be in an environment where trust and safety can be had. Maintain presence. This is coaching. This is not a conversation. This is not a lecture. This is not consulting. This is not a place for me to tell a funny joke, right? Maintaining presence. This is a coaching session. I'm a coach. I'm no longer a person. We're paid. This is a paid session where we've established and maintained an agreement, a contract. Different, right? So we maintain the presence. We have to put on the hat. Number 6, listens actively, right? Active listening, letting the client lead. And then number 7, evokes awareness. And this is what Jimmy was talking about today, where everything that we do in a session, or everything that we should be, not everything, everything's a sort of a big word, but so much of what we do is about evoking awareness with the people that we work with. Of course, not telling them, not explaining to them, not learning it for them, but creating an environment where their own awareness and their insights can come up from inside them, right? Evoking that awareness. And this is so, and this is where 2, 3, 4, 5, say 3 establishes, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's your coaching session, right? What we're really working at. And then we get to comp 8, which is facilitates client growth. And that can happen at the end of the session or sort of in the middle of the session, or it can happen kind of anywhere. But this is an important one. This is partnering with the client to transform the learning and insights into action, right? This is moving forward. We talk about contracting, comp 3. When I start with a new client, I say, hey, the way I run my sessions are, and we can choose to do them differently if we want to, but let's contract on this. The way I choose to do my sessions are, you bring a topic, we work through that topic for about 80% of the session, and then in the last 5 or 10 minutes, I'll sort of hit the brakes and say, are we ready to turn into action? And then we'll spend those last 5 minutes discussing, 5 or 10 minutes discussing, what have we talked about? What have we learned? What insights have come up? Where does that lead us in terms of action? Because with the clients I work with, I want to make sure that we're always moving towards action, always moving to something. What did you do? Had a great conversation with Eric. I had, again, I was out to dinner with someone and they said, it was a room full of people. And one of the people I had coached a couple of years before. And you know what he said about our coaching? He said, yeah, you know, Eric, I really enjoyed our conversations, right? What a fail, I thought to myself. What a lost opportunity. This guy in a coaching relationship just said he enjoyed my conversations. This is not what we're here for. And so this is a signal to me that I need to double down and really think about what are we doing here? Now, if someone doesn't want action, well, they design the action. Sometimes the action is just think about it. So I don't want you guys to think that I'm like constantly pushing people out the window. Sometimes doing nothing is an action, right? And if that's the action, I want to sit on this. Great, then do that. You know, how will you sit on it? Anyway, we'll get to that later. But the idea is that I want to be facilitating this action. Facilitates client growth. Funny though, even as I think about this, it's, you know, I often equate comp 8 with action, but it does say growth there, doesn't it? I mean, the definition says move them towards action, but really it's just looking for growth. So even now, as I contemplate it, it sort of makes me think, well, you know, move towards action, yes, but, you know, maybe there should be an opening there for me to consider. Is growth always action? Action always growth? Somewhat existential, I suppose. So comp 8 is about partnering with the client. That's an important second half to that, to transform insight into action, turning awareness into momentum, supporting clients as they design their own next steps, right? During a session, as I said, actions will sometimes become visible to me during a session. Hey, this client might want to do some research. Hey, this client might want to make a list of things they might want to do or go after or whatever. These actions, I'll jot them down in a session and keep them to myself, and maybe offer them up for discussion in the end of our session. Celebrating progress and fostering accountability, yeah. And then reinforcing that the client owns the learning and the action. This is why the ideas that I have for what they do are not nearly as good as the ideas that they have, right? Because their ideas are better than mine. They're probably, they're more localized, but more importantly, they come up from within. These are my ideas. I decided that I want to do A, B, and C, right? Cool. There is discussion coming, I promise. It's not just going to be me running my mouth. I wanted to hit the markers very quickly. They're really choppy. There's a lot of stuff in here. Comp 8, partners with the client to transform learning and insight into action. Insight into action, and then promotes client autonomy in the coaching process. They decide, they determine, they choose to do these things. 801 works with the client to integrate new awareness, insight, or learning into their worldview or behaviors. Integrate new awareness. What did we learn today? What have we been discussing? We've just spent 40 minutes discussing what's going on with your coworkers, right? And you've come up with some insights, hopefully. What will we do with that learning? 802, design goals, actions, and accountability measures, right? What action could you do? How would you measure it? How will you hold yourself accountable? 3, supports client autonomy, right? Autonomy, agency, their decisions. 4, supports the client in identifying potential results or learnings from identified actions. This is a fun one too. Okay, so if you do go and talk to your team members about this, if you do go to HR and discuss this with them, if you do decide to have a one-on-one with your boss about this, what would you learn? What might be the result? What might the results be? What might the results be good? What might the results be otherwise? In 805, invites the client to consider how to move forward, including resources, support, and potential barriers. Do you have what you need? How might you go about this? What resources? Do you have the support? Do you have the resources? 806, partner with the clients to summarize learning and insights within or between sessions. Okay. 807, brand new. New to file. Partners with the client to integrate learning and sustain progress throughout the coaching engagement. Integrate learning and sustain progress throughout the coaching engagement. This is one that I'm very much looking forward to hearing a little bit more about in the upcoming year as to how we're supposed to really work with this one. And we can talk about in a few minutes. 808, this one's been modified from what it was. Acknowledges the client's progress and successes. Used to be celebrates. Anyone remember celebrates? Is anyone a fan of celebrates? I'm a big fan of celebrates, right? But now it's acknowledges. Again, I think that's something we can talk about. And then 809, partners with the client to close the session. Abby, with the remaining time we have today, is there anything else you'd like to get out there or throw out there or contribute before we bring the session to a close? No. Okay. Well, then I'll see you next Tuesday. So not in Shakti here. This is something Jimmy was talking about a lot today. Comp 8 is about partnering with the client to transform insight into action. Yes, but it isn't complete. Coaching isn't complete when awareness happens. That's just the midpoint. Jimmy was talking a lot about that today. It's not the finish line. Awareness is only awareness. We are here to change people's lives, presumably move them forward from one comfort zone to another. So the awareness is the midpoint. Now, what do we do with it? Comp 8 insists that we must do something with it. If there are insights, if there are awareness, we must do something with it. Not we must. We must invite the opportunity for our clients to decide what to do with it, right? Competency 8 ensures that insight becomes movement. That what was noticed becomes lived. It keeps coaching from being an interesting conversation, right? Remember that? My old friend, hey, Eric, I really enjoyed our conversations. Not good coaching. It keeps coaching from being interesting conversations and makes them transformational experiences. And then growth Again, growth versus action. Growth doesn't always mean a big plan. Sometimes it's a small mindset shift that can change everything, anything, all of it, move them in the right direction. I'm going to introduce now the relationship between comps 3 and 7, right? I often think of these as a bookends or as a set of bookends. And later, I think in the next slide, I have an aviation metaphor upcoming. But does anyone else sort of out there think about these things at all? And if they do you see a special relationship between comps 3 and 7? Anyone? 3 is an interesting one. I mean, when we really, excuse me, pardon me, I misspoke. A special relationship between 3 and 8. Comp 3, the contracts, and 8, the action. And then what Jimmy Glenos was taking us through earlier, which is 7, right? Let's go to 7. 7 facilitates client insight and learning by using tools and techniques, powerful questioning, silence, metaphor, or analogy. Those are basically outlined in comps 4, 5, 6, right? But 7 evokes the awareness. And once we have that, then we're set up for comp 8, which is how do we action it. Now going back to comp 3, does anyone see the special relationship between 3 and 8 bookends? 3 is the contract, right? What are we here to do today? What are we talking about? What do you want to get out of it? Why is it important? How will you know you've got it? Where do we start, right? That's 3. It's a starting point. What's 8? What have you learned today? What will you do with it? How will you hold yourself accountable? Do you have the resources, etc., right? So I see 3 and 8 as being the very bookending transactions of what is the business of a coaching call, right? Or a coaching session. Now, we all run our sessions in our own way, right? I do people in careers, right? So everything seems to be very sort of business oriented. But boom, what are we here for? Boom, what will we do with it? Jimmy has his hand up. Oh, James, the mute, the blasted mute.
Well, apparently Command A doesn't work in here, but it must.
Thanks for Mac.
Thanks for letting me in. Yeah, I know. I switched over, so I'm still trying to get used to it. Yeah, like if you don't set 3, how do you go to 8? Like 8's a waste of time if you don't have 3 set. So yeah, you've got to come to an agreement. You've got to set some sort of goal, some sort of direction. So yeah, there's a total complement between the two.
Yeah, thank you for that reinforcement. And you guys, welcome Jimmy. Jimmy just moved from a PC to a Mac, so I think that's super cool. That was new insight or new learnings from this morning's session. And I think it's Command Shift A that will do mute and unmute on a Mac. Anyway, yeah, 3 and 8 special relationship. Okay, good, cool. So an aviation jet of 4, get that? Oh my God, you got to be kidding me. Did he really write that? That was an Oscar typo, a jet of 4. And then I was like, wait, no, that actually works. I meant to type an aviation metaphor and it came out jet of 4. And I looked down, I'm like, yeah, I guess J&M are close. That's natural, but it's also what we're here for. This neat little relationship, the aviation thing is going to be like comp 3, right? I mean, crafting the flight plan, right? Clarifying purpose, parameters, and success measures. How many times have you heard this in coaching? Like, we can't go anywhere unless we have a destination, right? Like, I mean, maybe that's a little ACC or a little like coaching school, but it still rings true. Like, we need, I think this is a core competency summit. So we're talking about like the core of coaching here. And I think being able to get into a session and say, hey, what are we focusing in on here today, right? Establishing, maintaining an agreement for the session, right? Creating that flight plan. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? Then comp 4 to 7, particularly 7. We're in the air, we're flying, cruising altitude, right? That's the whole coaching session. That's listening, that's intuiting, that's deep questioning, it's active listening, awareness, all the coach things that we do, right? Looking for energy, all that stuff happens in 4 to 7. And then 8 is another shift that I intentionally moved to. In the end, it is time to end this session. I told you about 10 minutes out is when I started thinking about it. the sort of the subroutine of how do we land this plane starts showing up, right? I start backing my clients out of this exploratory mode and sort of orient them back towards, okay, now how do we bring this back to reality? How do we land this plane, land the plane, get them to the gate, and then get them walking up that jetway back into the real world, right? Because that's what they have to do. They have to emerge from this session, and they should be emerging somewhere else. Comp 8 allows us to sort of take them there, right? Get them to that jetway. So landing the plane and arriving at a destination, integrating learning, designing next steps, reinforcing autonomy. Okay. And I'm kind of in the middle section where we're sort of flying around at cruise altitude, I can be pretty loosey-goosey. I can let a conversation go wide. I can try to rein it in. I can let them go far out. I can let them verbally process. I can force them into, really holding up the mirror, right? There's all sorts of tools I can use in that depending on what happens. I think it's, what is it, CTI that calls that, what do they call it? Dancing in the moment or something, I think is that thing. I forget what they call it, but the idea that, you're really working there in partnership. This is where, we can look in their eyes, right? And say, where are you going? Are we getting there? 8 is about us leading them back down to the ground. So it's been an awful lot of talking. Do you guys know I have a meter on my desk that shows how much I've been talking versus everyone else, and I've been talking 65% of the time. It's a good coaching tool. Comp 8 is about partnering with the client to transform insight into action, as I have said on every slide in this deck. Let's discuss, what does facilitating growth mean to you and in your coaching practice? I'd love it if a few of you would raise hands, get in a line, and just really talk to the others. Not to me, not to provide the right answer, but sharing is or rather learning at least our ICF South Florida is a shared experience. So you just heard me rattle on for a few minutes here, more than a few. I'd now like to hear some other people talk about their relationships with comps 3 and 8, about comp 7, about how they run their sessions, about how they make sure their clients are moving forward. I know all of you are take this so very seriously, so I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And I invite you to raise your hand. And then Mickey, I'll ask you to introduce yourself, tell us who you work with, and
Sure.
love to hear your thoughts.
Hi, everyone. Mickey Wallace. I've been doing coaching for many decades. This ICF stuff really is just helping me grow. I was in the session this morning with Jimmy, give me some blow away insights. So I'm just so grateful to be here. Thank you so much. I work basically with leaders and doing coaching from the front line to about the director level in the organization. And this question about what does facilitating growth mean to me and my coaching practice? A lot of it comes down to, in the ideal situation, creating as many ahas as possible based on what we've contracted to work on. And I admit sometimes I'm a little bit loosey-goosey about how we start the sessions. And so one of the areas that I do want to get better at is that competency 3. And for me, facilitating growth is that maximum learning opportunity, that they have the time to explore something that's really important to them, and then create just 1 or 2 steps. I'm not really big on a detailed plan. I just want them to walk away with some observable actions that they can take to start to move the needle forward. So that's about where I fit in this in terms of my philosophy, Eric. Hopefully that helped.
It helps quite a bit, I think, to get, another perspective. And I'd like to see some more hands raised or some people come off mute here and share their, I know so many of you personally, and I know how much everyone has to offer here. So I'm hoping that you guys will back me up a little bit. Russell, I didn't do it. Good, excellent. But I just want to say, wait, back to Mickey very quickly though. Yeah, Mickey, the action can be small. The action can be nothing. The action can be think about it. The action can be, I don't know. Maybe it's, like I said, maybe it's never action. Maybe it's just fostering that growth, right? Where did Russell go? Did he accidentally knock himself offline?
I'm still here, I think.
There you are, right in the center. Russell, please.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to think about. how do we facilitate growth throughout the entire session? And I think that I like to think of a coaching session as a transformation. I do a lot of work with, as you know, neurotransformation and that kind of thing. And I look at it like you use the jetaphor. My metaphor is like a Pluto archetype where you descend into the underworld and then transform in the underworld and then ascend out of the underworld. So I like to look at a session like when somebody comes in, we spend a lot of time really talking about the agreement, really to kind of descend through that, and then spend time working on transforming. And I keep telling myself that in a session is it's transformation. It's transformation. How can you get them to transform how they're thinking about things and reframing things? And then at the end, sort of ascend out of that. So they leave with a good action plan. But I like that. And I think I'm going to write that down for myself on a little post-it to facilitate growth throughout the entire thing, because often you think that that's just at the end, really, when you're coming up with the action and how can you use that to facilitate growth. But as Mickey said, if you get an aha moment along the way, that's growth right there. So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind along the way.
Yeah, I do. Excellent points, Russell. Thank you for that. And again, when those aha moments happen in the middle of a session, I mean, at least for me, I mean, I never hesitate to say, whoa, let's stop there for a second and just pause. I mean, again, directive somewhat, but to pause there in a second and say, that sounds like a really interesting, like that sounds like an important moment. Can we just, acknowledge that moment, right? Yeah, because growth happens anytime along the way. Shakti, hello.
Hi there. Sorry that I was a little late. For me, that your question, it's something that I try to figure out in the process of working with the client, because for me, it's important to understand what growth actually means for them. Because some people are really, can be more heavily in the exploring phase of things, and so taking action and try and finding that growth can mean a different thing in a different stage of the coaching experience and partnership. And some people are already have a lot of clarity around, what they want and who they are and what's important for them. And so we spend less time in that, and facilitating growth requires me to show up differently. So I think for me, it really depends on what growth means for them, where we are in the process. And as you said, dancing in the moment, a very big thing for CTI, is really be present at all times with what is coming up for them, and always inviting. I think part of our job as coaches is to always invite the opportunity to share something that we notice, as you just said. Or, and they may or may not want to hear it in that moment. And that's hopefully the trust that you have where they can say that. That maybe in that moment, that is not what they need to focus on. So yeah, that's what came up for me.
I love that, Shakti. Thank you. And, again, just to share a quick, an example from the trenches, there's a client I'm working with right now who is absolutely devastated at his job loss and his inability to find a new job. He's been sitting there for quite a long time. And I really had to fight the urge to sort of push him on my own timeline and really, tell him, hey, buddy, it's time to get up off the couch and go get yourself a job. I really had to resist that, right? Because I needed to first, allow him to be who he is, allow him to be in the mind space that he is, cultivate trust and safety, but at the same time, allow him to indicate to me, tell me, follow him, right? Allow him to tell me when he's ready to stand up off that couch, right? I let him know I was there to support him. I'm ready for you when you are, but if we're still here, we're still here. How can we get through this moment? How can we get through this week? But the struggle there was not forcing him into, yeah. Well, come on. We need to dust off that resume and go find some places to get you interviewed, right? Jimmy?
Thank you. So I had a comment that I was going to make, but I'll first of all say I totally know where you're coming from on that, Eric, because I had a client very recently. It was a career related thing, and yeah, he's devastated by the lack of prospects and ability and all that sort of stuff. And though he wants to get a job and he wants to do it quickly, he was like, there were other priorities. And so, I can push and say, well, what's it going to take? How many hours a day are you going to do this? How many, applications are you going to send out? How much time are you going to spend on LinkedIn or Indeed or Monster or whatever the things are? And like, he resisted. He's like, I can't even think about that. I can't think about the hours because it's too depressing. I know that, the base on my pace right now, I'm not going to find a job for 2 years. And so he's like, I can't talk about that. I was like, okay, fine. I totally get it. Where would you like to go? And then we went in a totally different path, so it was like, there was an initial, like he still wants the job, but he's like, I can't do that right now. I can't do it. It's too depressing. Let me move on. And, on the other side of the coin, facilitating growth is an interesting thing, right? So my talk earlier on number 7 evokes awareness. We can spend a lot of time, and we should spend time evoking awareness and getting there. And some people are really good at that, and they become aware. And I'll admit I'm guilty of, oh, okay, I understand. I'm aware. I'm bought in. I own the prospect of where I'm going to go. But then the accountability part is hard. And we can have all the grand dreams and ideals and desired goals and outcomes in the world. But if we can't get to step forward, and that's where that number 8 comes in, and a strong coach can gently move the client towards, how do we take the first step? What is the plan? What does a plan look like for you? And I think maybe probably the most important part of it is, what's going to get in your way? How are we going to clear the roadblocks? Where are you going to stumble? Because that's the thing that's going to hold you. You got the plan. You're like, I know my next step. I know the plan. I got it all laid out in front of me. What do I do when stuff gets tough? And how do I get those things out of the way?
Yeah, I mean, the identifying the action is just a part of it, as Jimmy just pointed out, right? Very apt. I mean, identify the action. Do you have the resources? How will you hold yourself accountable, and what's going to get in the way, right? Because if we can pre-visualize what the hangups are going to be and talk about solutions for that, then all the better, right? All of a sudden they're no longer scary. Two things to that. My client, who is similar to Jimmy's, who is just absolutely put up, like, okay, so about trying to find a job, or about job searching activity, what will you do? Well, I'm starting to take walks daily. I'm good with that. Getting out of the house. You've been sitting in the house for how many months now? Now you're walking, right? I'll take that as progress, and I'll take that as a win, Cool. Thank you. Anyone else? Someone else had their hand up. Who was it? Slippery.
It
Put
was
their hand
Abby.
down.
It was me.
Is Abby? Okay. Hi, Abby.
I've never met any of you all, so hello. For me, I have a background in sport and performance psychology. So in my practice, we work a lot in small shifts. So it's all about shifts. And that's a language that I like to use a lot. And what kind of bucket are we shifting in today? Are we shifting in our mindset? Are we shifting in our actions, our behaviors, our perspective? So just bucketing that shift and starting in those manageable pieces is where I like to focus.
Shifts, right? Yeah. Yeah. The components that we turn. And then Abby, how much importance do you, or rather, what's the relationship for you, the connection between the shifts and the growth of the action?
Yeah. So when we make those small shifts in ourselves, in whatever bucket that is, then that can lead to the actions that we take. So we gained all of this great insight. We did all this in-depth searching and learning during our session or series of sessions. Okay, now what are we shifting in ourselves? And just really boiling it down to these really small confined shifts to be able to reach those greater goals. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Who else has thoughts? I will take us to another question here. You know, as you guys think about your own sessions, how do you know that you landed the plane successfully? This is something I struggle with a little bit. How do we know that we've got them to a proper endpoint? Who's got thoughts on that? Is this the same as saying what is a good session, or did I do a good job? Maybe, you know, maybe not.
I think
Anyone else care to share? Yeah.
I think we ask what they've gained and how we tie it back to, because I don't think this is about us. I think whether the client had a good session or not, in the moment that you're ending the session, is a good thing to ask them to reflect on. And I wouldn't call it ever a good or a bad session, because I don't like to use those adjectives at all. But I would just ask them what they received and what they're walking away with, or what they found most valuable. It depends on, you know, the client, what language I use. But and then I have a lot of clients who then, and you may have the same thing, I think, probably, because I think we all have similar experiences in this way, that people come back to you afterwards. And so the goodness of the meeting is sometimes not even that clear to them in that last minute or last 5 minutes of the meeting, but may come to them afterwards. So I think just opening up that question and giving them the space to think about that is what I like to do.
Shakti, thank you for that. And I'm going to come back to you in a second, Shakti, for a quick intro. I'll explain in a second, but Shakti just brought up something really important, which was even the idea of judging sessions as being good or bad, and how clumsy that is of me, because Shakti's absolutely right. It's not for us to determine, of course. You know, we can, but I love the fact that, and this is why I'm encouraging everyone else to speak, right? To sort of, you know, check me against what I'm saying, and also bring your own perspectives, because, you know, I'm looking around the room and I see so many of us, we all do this in our own way, right? And the core competencies are a starting point and a guidepost and a measuring stick and all those things. But in the end of it, at the end of it, it's us and our clients in that room alone, right? And we're really, both of us are really trying to figure out what's the best way out. Rosario, I'm going to come to you in 1 second, but Shakti, one of the things we did earlier, I know you were a few minutes late, and this is why I bring this up. Whenever everyone has opened themselves up, we've asked them to say, oh, and this is also who I am and who I work with, so we can sort of get to know what all of our sort of who we are and who we work with. Shakti, would you care to take a second and tell everyone who you are and who you work with?
Sure. Shakti Radhikishan. I am a CTI trained and certified coach. Also, I have my ACC certification through ICF, and I have been coaching for about 4-ish years now, 3-4-ish years. I'm still kind of fairly broad, I think, in the type of clients that I end up working with, but I've noticed that I gain a lot of pleasure from working with people who are new in the workforce, or who are new in taking on a leadership role. So emerging leaders in corporate America, or even, you know, I'm not very industry specific, to be honest, because I think a lot of similarities exist in different industries. In terms of leadership. And so that tends to be the type of client I like to work with, people who are figuring out how they take their expertise in the matter, in the specifics, and bring it to expertise of leadership, which is, to me, two entirely different worlds of expertise. And so I like to support them in that growth for themselves.
That's great. Thank you, Shakti. Thank you for that. Awesome. Rosario.
Hi. Well, I like to finish, coming back to what we're talking about, I like to finish my sessions asking them, what do you take? What do you take from our session from today? And sometimes they really surprise me on the insight they gained. Because of the reflection, they become aware of something that is really insightful. Like, just by asking them, what do you take from today? Sometimes I'm really gladly surprised of the insight they got. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
I'm sort of, I'm working towards ACC right now, and I've done a little of everything. Like Shakti, like my coaches have been from different, young professionals, executive coaching. I did a little of team coaching with United Way Miami. So I'm just like in the process of like figure out what is the area that I really want to work on,
It's cool. For me, who I want to work with seems to change almost every year. Almost every year, Rosario, I find myself going into fourth quarters saying, okay, how am I going to do things differently next year? And who am I going to work with differently? It seems that my niche changes almost every year. It's funny. It seems like going into 2026, I'm back into kind of what I started with, which is so similar to Shakti also, which is just sort of people who are in their careers and trying to figure out what in the world. I mean, I don't want to speak for Shakti, but I do find myself working with a lot of people who are in their careers and trying to figure out what in the world, how did I get here? Where am I going to go? Is this right? This is wrong. This feels wrong. Great. Let's talk. Anyway, okay. Opening it to the floor for final thoughts on this, on 8. Anything else coming up? It's always nice to leave with a tool, isn't it? I'm going to share screen here and we'll play with this one. I thought we would have some time here. So, I thought maybe we could play around with a little bit of tools and a little bit of role play and fake client coach work. So maybe you guys can start thinking about who in the room might have well, we're not really going to do any coaching, but I'd like to play with 3 and 8 a little bit with the time we have left, okay? I'm going to take you through these 2 tools very quickly that you guys can play with, choose not to play with, whatever. But they're really good to come back to in those moments where we really need to capture the basics of the coaching relationship. Comp 3-ish, the TOMS. Topic, objective, measure of success, meaning/motivation, and the starting point. Has anyone seen this before? No? And then the place on the right, which is Comp 8, right? Progress, learning, action, application, accountability, celebration, and the ending. I don't know where these originated. They were brought to me by a mentor coach I've been working with for years, a woman named Jennifer Powers, MCC. She uses these. We drill on these all the time. So these are very familiar to me as being a way of just sort of, they're stuck in the back of my head. And I can dial them in when things are getting a little bit shaky or when we really feel the need to fly that plane according to a very strict flight plan. Very quickly, Comp 3, the TOMS. Topic, what's the topic? What are we talking about today? What is it, right? Objective, what do you want to walk away with? Measure, how will you know you have achieved? How will you know you have achieved the objective? Meaning, what is the importance of this now? Why does this matter now? What is the meaning of this now? And then start. Where should we start? You said you're a little bit like this, or you're a little bit like that. Would you want to start with one of those or something else? Right? And at a bare minimum, this is all we have to do to get Comp 3 covered and get us into a real coaching session. If we run through the TOMS, we've got it all. The topic, the outcome, the measure, why it's important, and then also that starting point. At the end, Comp 8, progress. What progress have you made towards your goal, towards the objective, towards, I don't know, the finding of inner peace or world peace or whatever? What progress have you made? That's Comps 8.1 and 8.2. Learn. What have you learned about yourself? What have you learned about the situation? Right? The who and the what. The you and the what. Action, PLAA, third A, action. What actions will you, based on today's insights, what action will you take, right? Based on today's learnings, knowledge, insights, epiphanies, whatever, how do we turn that into action? What are you going to do with that, Application, how will you do it? Do you have the resources? What stands in the way? To Jimmy's point, right? What are the obstacles going to be? Accountability, how will you hold yourself accountable? You can do this by when? You know, you're going to send this to whom? By when? You know, do you have the accountability you need to do it? Do you need to send me? Who will hold you accountable? Celebration and acknowledgement, 808. You have made real progress. Let's spotlight that. How does that feel? This needs to come from the heart, right? I mean, does anyone actually do celebration? Does anyone make a point to do this, to actually execute faithfully? Let's just put my hand here. Execute faithfully at 808. Meredith, yes. Shakti, thank you. Yeah. Valeska's with me. All right. Yeah. Celebration, you know, from the heart. These people are making real progress, doing real things, you know, changing their worlds, you know, and to take a moment to do 808, you know, and they just change it from celebrate to acknowledge. And I think there's a big difference between saying, Allison, I'd like to acknowledge that you have shown up today wearing a blue shirt, right? That's one thing. To say, Allison, I understand how hard it is for you to show up today in that blue shirt, right? And really be here. I have got to tell you, I am impressed. I don't think you could have done it 6 weeks ago, and yet here you are doing it today. That's movement, that's progress, that's for real, and I'm happy for you. How do you feel? You know, I don't know why they took celebrate out, but that one seems to be important to me in a world where we're not doing enough of pointing out what other people are doing. That's progress, or, you know, I don't know, supporting them, right? Acknowledgement just doesn't seem enough, not for the shifts that we're looking for. And then ending, just polite. Is there anything else that needs to get brought out into the world before we end this session? You know, yes, Eric, I was kind of thinking we should move to once a month. Wait, what? Gotta go. Bad idea. Shakti.
I wanted to, you mentioned something that, about the word celebrate versus acknowledge. For me, even as a client, acknowledgement is more a sense of me being seen and heard in whatever aspect is being acknowledged. Celebration doesn't land for me personally in the same way in my body. It might be something fantastic, but it doesn't land in the same depth inside of me as an acknowledgement does. An acknowledgement is much more deep and personal to me than a celebration. So I don't know what motivated that change, but that's at least the word acknowledgement really, really makes an impact on me. And also maybe it's because of my training, because in CTI, we always talked about acknowledgement, but it just feels that way in my body.
Yeah, 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 and I can certainly appreciate that perspective. I mean, and you must not be the only one. I mean, to make changes to these core comps is like, it's a big deal. So, and they base it on the feedback of thousands and thousands of coaches. So I'm sure you're not the only one. For me, acknowledgement seems to happen a lot earlier in a session where it's, I find myself doing a lot of acknowledgement along the lines of, okay, I can acknowledge, or acknowledgement of the fact that, yeah, that sounds like a pretty rough situation. Again, back to my client who's, got no prospects, no hope, and no job, right? As he would say it. Yeah, that sounds rough. It certainly does. I mean, I can certainly acknowledge how terrifying this must be, right? How frustrating this must be, or how you must feel, how the injustice, I can certainly identify with and acknowledge the injustice that you're talking to me of having devoted 15 years to this career only to find yourself out on the street, So I don't know, but yes. And the other thing I would say to that, or not say to that, but say in agreement with that, is that a lot of it depends on, the nuance, right? I think in some instances it's appropriate, given the energy or the vibe in the room with myself and certain clients, for us to get into a celebration. And then there's others where I think I would have the astuteness to understand and read the room and say, this is probably better for acknowledgement, So maybe both should be in there. Stacy Jackson. Hi, Stacy. Good point, Kim Moore. Hi, Stacy. Uh-oh, we've got you stuck on mute.
Oh, sorry. I was eating lunch, unseen and unheard. I'm in South Florida. I work primarily with senior leaders. I work in construction. I don't have any background in construction, but primarily I work with construction, home building, and engineering. I just sort of fell into those industries, but I work primarily, like I said, with senior leadership. I do a lot of celebrating because they don't celebrate at all themselves. Their leaders don't celebrate them. And oftentimes I find that I am the one that says, you should really be proud of that. And they say, I am, but I'm moving on to the next thing. And so often it's a time, I think, for them to appreciate their small wins in environments that move so fast. No one really acknowledges or has a celebratory culture. So I feel like part of the role that I play is pulling that out, allowing them to see that and not only acknowledge it, but allow them to celebrate it. Because some of the things that they do, they're building new homes in an interest rate environment that's unfriendly, and they're really doing well. So they're oftentimes, pulling off miracles. So I think it's important that somebody helps them celebrate those things. So I actually like the word celebrate. Works for me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I can see, and again, not to make a snap judgment and a quick observation, Stacy, it seems like you really have an energy that brings itself to celebration. And so I would hope, I don't want to say I'm sure, but I'm sure it resonates with the people you work with. Otherwise, you would probably move on to something else. But one thing, Stacy, that you triggered in me, which I think is really interesting, is that people, as you just said, people don't celebrate. And that's something to remember too. Compliments, celebrations can make people very nervous. They're not used to it many times. So, it takes a little bit of nuance to get in there sometimes, huh? Yeah, cool. Iris, how are you doing?
Well, hi. Yeah, I am sort of where Stacy is in terms of celebrating versus acknowledging at the end point. I think that what coaching does is acknowledge where people are throughout the process. The people I work with are mostly midlife and older women who often have been through loss and grief, and I help them age with pizzazz and confidence and find new meaning and purpose. And I think women often don't celebrate themselves. They celebrate everybody else. So, I like to be a party to helping them learn to celebrate themselves. And I think especially when they've arrived at a point where they've got a lot of new awareness and they're dedicated to making changes, and they've begun to make those changes or have already made them. I really want to celebrate with them and help them celebrate themselves.
Cool. Jimmy gave a hand clap. I'll give a hand clap for that too. I think that's great, Iris. And I think you said it. I want to celebrate with them. Okay, well, that's part of what we bring, yeah, it's cool. Thank you for that share. And it sounds like you work with some really fascinating and interesting people as well. So I'm sure that's fascinating work. Cool. I'm going to look at the comments for a few minutes here and see what I missed and see what came up. And at the same time, I'd like to invite anyone who has any questions or anything that they would like to see or put out to the group. How do you guys feel about? What do you think about? I think Eric was wrong when he said ... Anything like this, I'd love to offer out to the group. Open for questions, answers, observations, or other ways to look at Comp 8 today. Light bulb moments, space for, yeah. I don't see a whole lot of amazing questions showing up in the chat. Trying to think about the things that I wanted to put in the presentation, but was pretty sure we wouldn't have time to cover. Okay. Great. Anything? I will divert very quickly. As Valeska has mentioned, I'm the vice president of the marketing and communications committee. Communications and marketing, new committee. It's a new committee. We're just scoping it out right now. We have a few people on our all volunteer committee, and I would just like to toss it out there. If anyone in the room is looking for a committee to join, we're looking for a few more people to join us in our committee. As Valeska said, some of the things that we're going through, this is only going to take about 30 more seconds here. For the rest of this year, there's one thing we're focused on, which is sort of updating our technology, our social media transmission technology, and our newsletter distribution technology. So we have a couple of technology projects that we're working on. And then next year, we're going to be getting into, or at least starting to have discussions on, to what extent can ICF South Florida be more of a voice, be more of a content provider or a discussion starter or a tips, tools, and techniques purveyor or whatever. But how can we better serve our members by providing insights, awareness, stuff like this, but more in your inbox. So that's kind of where we're going with that. So those should be getting better as well. But it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen with just me, Valeska, and Meredith and Shakti. It needs other people too. So if anyone's interested in that, please reach out to myself, Valeska, or Meredith, and we would be happy to discuss that. Top 8, going big. And final thoughts here, Jimmy.
So
Hello, sir.
I'm not volunteering. I am volunteered too much already, so I'm not volunteering.
Yeah,
for
I know
this,
you
even
are.
though it sounds like I love that stuff. I did see Kim's comment. How action gets observed by the company is often tricky, and then she goes on. Kim, I would love to hear more, if that's okay, Eric, if I hijack your
Please.
commentary for a moment.
Thank you.
The overbearing boss that I am. Kim, would you mind sharing a little bit more about that? Because I love that, and I think you're spot on with that point.
Yeah, let me clarify. I was trying to type right and had traffic going on behind me. So sorry, it was a little bit jagged in the comment. What I struggle with 8, whether it's within a session or across the engagement, is this wonderful thing of growth that's happening and the presence of a kickoff, midpoint, and close at minimum with a boss who wants to visibly measure or observe what's going on. And as a coach, I'm in Houston and I work mostly with VP and senior VP, some execs, some in the C-suite, but there's a lot of pressure on them. And this interior growth transformation is great. What I struggle with is wanting to tie what's happening in the session to how will that help accomplish this visible marker measure that we've agreed to with your boss. I don't do it every time, but I usually try to align. And while I don't think that's dangerous to do in each session, I personally struggle really hard not to want to lift it onto the table and say, are we aligned with this? Or how is what you're learning as we get into the last, if we're landing the plane, or even as we're setting the goal, how is this in service to, goal 1, 2, or 3, or is it not? But let's just understand that. So I carry the weight of accountability to the boss and to the company, as I know everyone on this call does. And to be honest, I feel like celebration is for the end. And I love that it's a shared heart with the client in each session. I agree with that. But at the same time, I feel like I have to wait until the boss goes, good job. So I am confessing that I am a reformed consultant that wants to hit the markers that I gave to the company. So I'm throwing that out to the group of all of us, coaches, and say, I don't feel we've dealt with it yet in 8, but maybe we have, and that's the point.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kim, for sharing that. It's a really fine line, right? Because there's two sides of it for sure, if not three. For me, and I've worked in L&D for like 30 years. So, people always told me, my people need training. I'm like, okay, do they? First of all, I will like, do they need training, or do they need supervision or accountability or evaluation or better process or better harmony among teammates? Like, I don't know that it's training. I don't know. Let's find out. Additionally, when you come in either as a consultant or a coach or a trainer or a talent management person of some sort, or OD, I always like to tell the sponsor, the boss, the executive team, how will you measure the work that's being done? That is not my job. I am telling you now, I am the coach, I am the trainer, I am the facilitator. I am not the person who will be here in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 10 years to say these things are being accomplished. That is the role of management at multiple levels. How will you, we're going to do the coaching, we're going to do the training. How are you going to measure those things? And how will you communicate with this person that I am currently working with to ensure that those goals are outlined, aligned, and being met? That is, I will be gone in 6 months. How will you maintain, to me, that's a sustainability question. That's all that is. It's a maintenance and sustainability. Like, I'll do the work to get it there. You've got to determine what is it that's going to be measured, how are you going to measure it, and how are you going to, celebrate, accountable, whatever.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Just before giving the word to Shakti, in the chat, Mickey said, wow, Kim, I so empathize with you on this. Thank you for bringing up. I work in a company where the senior leadership likes measurement, observable results. So I think this is it. Thank you, Mickey. Shakti?
I strictly from an ICF competency coaching perspective, which I don't think always aligns with what people are hiring coaches for. I'm hearing a little bit of a clash in Kim's and Mickey and probably all of us when we work with sponsors who are hiring us to coach clients, especially in the corporate world. There's a little bit of a clash between the strict coaching concept, which is, I think, what we're talking about here when we're looking at the competencies so explicitly, and when we're thinking about coaching that becomes a part of something more than coaching or something additional to coaching. Because to me, as soon as a third party has measurements that they are setting as expectations of the coaching contract, this is, I don't know actually, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know how you bring that into the competencies in a strict perspective. I do think that there's space for that, but it goes a little bit outside of our competencies. That doesn't live within our competencies because the client may have achieved all the goals that they wanted as a person, because we coach the person, not the topic. We don't coach towards external measurements that somebody is going to sit there and say, oh, Shakti became this, Shakti became that, Shakti produced X and Y and Z. This is not the outcome of coaching. That is a result that is a further result. The outcome of coaching is, who did I become? And then what am I capable of as that human being, that transformed human being? And so I don't know, it's, to me, to tie it directly to the competencies is a tricky one because I feel like it kind of falls outside. And then I guess I'm very curious how all of you who maybe, I don't typically have, I've not coached people where there's a third party. I've only worked directly with individuals. So I am curious, when you work with a third party, a sponsor, so to speak, how you work that in. How do you honor their expectations and honor the competencies, or do you acknowledge that that goes outside of the competencies, and then how do you hold yourself accountable to that?
Valeska?
I'll jump in here just for a second on this. I'm an internal leadership development coach. So part of that creates a responsibility to also be able to deliver internally. And so I do feel that tension of understanding the purpose and the purity of the coaching concepts, which I can apply. And at the same time, it is still that that responsibility that I have to help that leader that I'm coaching create something that's observable in the workplace in terms of a measurement. So there's a requirement there, and I set up as much as I can in these relationships that I go into with the leader who's being coached and the leader of leader. You know, we're not going to talk about confidential things, but we have measurement against leadership competencies. So most of our coaching in some way, shape, or form will fall under the umbrella of those competencies. But so much of what we do in those sessions in coaching with the leader are very much interior growth directed. And so that is why I'm just so glad Kim brought it up, because it's sometimes really hard to put all those pieces together. Sometimes those puzzle pieces don't fit quite right.
Yeah, indeed. And we'll go to Valeska in just one second. I think maybe Claudia was going to say something too, but Kim was just saying in the comments, coaching offers no performance guarantees. Transformation offers growth that builds and sustains capabilities. Yeah, so I think agreement there. Valeska?
I think just going back, if it is connected to the competencies or not, I think it is, because when we go with all those resources. The competencies are part of how we are as a coaches, and how we show up as coach to our client, the leader, and to the sponsor, and we can use those competencies not only with the client but in the negotiation with the sponsor. The way I do is all those measurements is a three-way conversation, and it's a three-way conversation, so it's an agreement that we between the coachee and his leader, and I'm there with them. I'm partnering with them for that. And I always leave a space for a midpoint conversation, because then at this midpoint we go back to that first conversation, to that measurement, and see what will be possible or not, or how the client is progressing and growing. And just how I deal with that.
Yeah. Right. Looking at the time here, I want to make sure that we finish here on time and get everyone back into their life cleanly. So I just have a couple.
While you continue, I'm going to share the QR code for the feedback. So I'm going to share a slide here very quickly, and so you can fill in the feedback while we continue. We have 10 more minutes, so I'll give a few minutes just for you to take a picture of this QR code.
I wonder if we can put this in the link in the chat. I'll put it in.
Thank you.
So one question I have for you guys, and I want you to think about this, is how skilled do you find yourself to be at Comp 8? When I think about the coaching and the different comps and my struggles and so on and so forth, how hard is Comp 8? Is Comp 8 something that generally we struggle with, we feel good at, we need to do more of? I'm happy to have revisited this opportunity with you, Eric, to repledge my, allegiance to Comp 8. I mean, what are your thoughts on your own proficiency towards fulfilling Comp 8 or your own interpretation of Comp 8? And Valeska, can you put up the code again? Oh, never mind. There it is. It's in the chat. The link is in the survey.
Yeah.
Great. Jimmy, how are you on Comp 8?
I don't know if I really struggle with Comp 8. The thing that I sometimes find, if you want to call it struggling is, am I getting there too soon? Right? Like, I'm pretty much an action-oriented person, so I want to hurry up and get to it right away. I'm like, yeah, I'm bought in. Let me get to the action planning. Let me get to the, what am I doing going forward? But when I'm coaching, I sometimes wonder, I'm like, I got to be careful that I don't go too soon. So that to me is the more struggling part is, am I going too soon? Otherwise, I'm happy to
Timing.
Comp 8 all day.
Mhm.
Who else? Thank you for that. In my first few years, I struggled with it, but like I said, I found a format which works for me, which is just simply dedicating time to it at the end and getting really comfortable with just sort of putting the question out there, putting the container of 5 minutes there and saying, I don't know, Jimmy, based on what we've talked about here for the past 40 minutes, how do you think you might want to be different, do different, act different? What's on your mind? What do you think? If anything.
I
Who
think
else? Anyone else struggle with 8?
yeah, I wanted to say, I think my struggle comes in the balance of remaining open that the client is in charge of the goals and the actions and the decision of whether they are reaching what they need to reach, and my understanding of that, and not trying to have my agenda come in, not having an agenda in the first place, right? Maintaining that I don't have an agenda on that. I think that's where I always need to keep reminding myself that that this is not about my agenda and rather theirs. And so to kind of keep asking the questions that they have clarity on that.
Couldn't agree more, Shakti. And I think that's, and again, more power to ICF South Florida and for all the presenters and all the participants in this, Core Competency Summit. This is the reason this happens every year, is because it's so easy to fall into old habits. It's so easy to fall into our own agendas or our own expectations or our own thoughts about where the client should be or shouldn't be or might be or whatever, and these competencies, as I said at the beginning, they really hold us accountable to process. It's really quite amazing. So the importance of spending once a year going up and down the list and just sort of recommitting to them, I think, is really important. Valeska, to you.
There's a comment how we come in coaching as a coach with what we are and our background. For me, I had to learn to really do and be attentive to Comp 8 because my background comes from psychology. So I was always looking for insights, for ahas. That was the most important for me. And neglecting Comp 8. So for me was different from Jimmy. I was just comparing with what you just said, Jimmy, because that is your natural, you tend to jump into it. For me, it was the opposite. I had to really be mindful and have that in mind and push on this because my background was come from a different space.
Yeah, right. I mean, and coming from different spaces, I mean, that again, the importance of the competencies, right? To keep us all honest to this, right? Because so many of us come from other places, other expectations, other ways of working with people on their things. Yeah.
Funny thing is, Valeska, my degree's in psychology. And I love the insight, but we got to get things done around here.
Kristen?
I really appreciate the difference in perspective that's being, considered here from everyone's intake. And it just occurred to me after that last comment that, yeah, my perspective is I'm a classroom instructor, and you don't leave the classroom until you know what's due next and what will you do between now and our next class session. And so one of the things that I've been working on in this competency is it is the client's timeline. But what are they willing to prioritize? Where do they want to start and finish? Or what is something that might be a longer term thing that they're working toward? And I have to show some restraint to not be, what are you going to do by the next time I see you? Because
Yeah.
it's a pattern that I admit I've just learned along the way in my other work.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Exactly. And Kristen, even as you bring that up, I think about like what happens when a client says, I don't feel like doing anything. And it's like, okay, well then, what might get in the way with that? And it's like, oh, I don't know, the thought that I should be doing something, self-talk telling me that I should be doing something other than sitting on my butt. And it's like, yeah, okay. But it's kind of like, then if you are resolving to take a moment or a pause or, to again, do nothing. Nothing is something, right? Then let's make sure that you're doing it. Let's make sure that you're actually sitting there doing nothing and coming and being in the moment, right? At least that's kind of where my inclination goes. But support them right where they're at. Yeah. Kristen, I think you said it very well. Their timeline, not ours. Their timeline. Different from any job I've ever held before. Hey, every place I've ever worked, it's been about someone else's timeline, all the way back to that newspaper route I had. Anyone remember newspapers? Long history of publishing. All the way back to that newspaper route, there were always clear expectations that everyone was on the hook for something. The last question, 3 minutes remaining. Based on our discussion today, what action, if anything, are you willing to commit to? Anyone?
I love that.
Thank you. Anyone got an answer for that? Based on our discussion today, what action, if anything, are you willing to commit to? Who's going to go with nothing? I say nothing. No.
I'm going to jump in here again. This was really valuable because it gave me a technical refresher on how to be much better at winding down my coaching sessions. And so my commitment is to review the things that you've put together for us and to consider what are 1 or 2 things that I'm going to do differently in my coaching session to include these steps. Thank you.
Thank you for that positive reinforcement. Thank you. It's almost a celebration. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mickey. Anyone else?
We have some comments in the chat. Abby said, continue to think about how can I can up my game with these competencies, set time aside to reflect on this. Kate will regularly remind myself it is the client's agenda here, not mine. Wow, lots of comments.
Yeah. Amelia, tell people how I help clients more often. Yeah, that's good. Amelia, yes, that's exactly right. Tell people, coaches, the number one thing we can do to help spread the knowledge of our craft is tell people what we do and how we help, well, not even help, how we support, whatever verb you want in there. Tell people how I help clients more often. Amelia, Shakti, revisit and intentionally apply Comp 8 in my next coaching session. Thank you, Shakti. Allison, putting more attention to the closing of the session and helping clients to capture growth and or move to action. Yeah, and Mickey mentioned this. It is about landing the session really hard. Start fast, go strong, land firm, right? Like, I mean, get in there, but stick the landing, make the session meaningful, make it, impactful. Shakti, thank you, Eric. Yeah, Shakti, you're welcome. Claudia, I will listen to the last recording and see what I missed. Oh my God, bless you. Anyone who listens to a recording of themselves at a coaching session, in my mind, deserves like hot fudge sundaes for a week. It's like murder, at least to me. Thanks for this superb presentation. Kim Moore, thank you for that. Iris, thank you. Thank you, Eric. Iris says, thank you, Eric. Good session. I will more actively review where the client was and where they are now and work on my closing of sessions. Awesome. Alina, thank you. Erica, expanding my path by practicing each of the competencies consciously. Yes, I really enjoyed this presentation. Thank you. Cool. It's bottom of the hour on the dot. Thank you all for being here.
And
going
we
through this.
have a request to share the presentation. Okay.
Oh, yeah, sure. For anyone who cares for the presentation, I will put it right here in the chat, right here, right now. And then however we share that elsewhere, we will, I'll work that out with Valeska.
Yeah, we can,
but
send the file
Yeah.
to all the attendees. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you,
And I just
everyone.
Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you everyone for staying the full 90 minutes. Thank you everyone for your thoughts and your inspired work and everything else. It has been my pleasure and my honor to be here with you today. So thank you all.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for this amazing 90 minutes. It was really, really important.
Great presentation.
Reflection, taking the reflection.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Bye,
you.
brother.
Thank
I'll see you soon, man.
Bye everyone. See you, Jenny. Bye.
See you.
Ciao.
Ciao.